né? Porque nós estamos usando muitos termos aqui que são termos específicos da área do direito. Então, o Ricardo ali já tá quase se titulando, pós-graduado em Direito, com essa semana aí da transmissão. Mas seria interessante se vocês falassem o mais pausadamente possível. Ok. Obrigado. Boa tarde a todos e a todas que nos veem aí. Então, se vocês pudessem falar o mais, né, lentamente possível, com espaço entre parágrafos. Eu já falei com o professor Nicolas, né? Para também falar lentamente, ele concordou, aqueceu, não é? E a ideia é nós começarmos com o professor Nicolas, que está com um problema de horário, né? Ele tem que sair da sala, essa inclusive é a sala de aula dele, né? Ele está na sala de aula ali, acabou o compromisso agora há pouco. Ele vai tomar o trem, não é? E aí logo depois, professor Luís e professora Maria, como vocês organizaram? Eu não sei, quem falará primeiro? Tem alguma ordem aí que vocês decidiram?
Professor, olha, a gente tinha pensado, aí a professora Carolina confirma ou coloca, a gente tinha pensado em eu começar a fazer uma primeira fala, depois a gente vai dialogando, né? A gente tem um conjunto de slides para serem apresentados, se isso não for um problema, né? A gente
não, inclusive aqui embaixo, né, eu acabei de explicar para o professor Nicolas, né? Basta baixar, né? Temos aqui na tela embaixo, vocês podem abrir e fazer a projeção, sem problema, tá?
Tá ótimo. Então, a gente tinha pensado em fazer dessa forma. Quanto tempo que o professor imagina que seria razoável para a gente terminar a fala, né? O total.
Para mim ou para a professora Maria?
Não, para o professor Alexandre.
Olha, nós definimos em 20 minutos, né?
Era isso mesmo que a gente tinha imaginado, só para...
Okay.
Então tá ótimo. Obrigado, professor.
Obrigado.
Carol, tudo bem dessa forma, professora?
Tudo certo, professor. Tranquilo.
Então tá, já, professor. Obrigado.
Então, só esperando aqui mais 4 minutinhos, né, para nós termos o horário regulamentar, né, para iniciarmos as transmissões. Ok. Ricardo, daí, iniciando a transmissão, eu vou para o WhatsApp, tá? Para auxiliá-lo.
Ok.
Antes de começar,
eu vou ficar um
tem
período
3 semanas,
sozinho.
só ficaria.
Eu devo ficar mais ou menos 1 hora sozinho até os intérpretes.
Gente, não, eu tô pensando conversando aqui no espaço. Eles estavam dividindo espaço.
30 minutos contigo, então.
Aí depois dia 2,
Não, 1 hora.
nós
Vão entrar só
saudável.
às 3.
Dia 16,
tá. Perfeito.
Eu vou ficar 1 hora sozinho, então, conforme eles vão falando,
aí dia 23,
aí você vai pro WhatsApp, né? E aí eu faço o trabalho.
Eu acho que está vazando o som aí da sua sala.
Porque tem outra pessoa trabalhando comigo aqui no mesmo estúdio.
A gente não tem igual. Também dá para tirar
Seria melhor que todos desligassem os microfones, pelo menos até que se inicie as exposições.
Isso.
Walmott, se me permite, posso fazer então aqui uma fala introdutória para já passar para a exposição?
Por favor. Então, abrindo os trabalhos dessa tarde, né, eu agradeço a todos e a todas, não é, que participaram e estão participando desse evento. Esse evento começou na terça. Thank you, Professor Nicolas. Obrigado, professor Luís Renato. Obrigado, professora Maria Carolina, por participarem dessa conferência, né, to participate in this lecture, e também por os belos textos que vocês ofereceram, for the text you offered to our book, Professor Nicolas. Thank you. Bom, nós temos uma programação de palestras hoje, é o último dia, que pena que é o último dia, né? E hoje nós temos aqui, como o nosso grande coordenador da tarde, aí é aquela coisa difícil, né? Quando a gente fala de amigos, né? Sempre paira aquela suspeição, mas o meu grande amigo, José Faleiros, né? Um dos grandes responsáveis pela produção desse livro, notadamente pela internacionalização desse livro. Ele é o nosso condutor dos trabalhos esta tarde. Então, temos um tempo de 20 minutos, né? Lecture time of 20 minutes, professor Nicolas. You can use your slides if you want.
I will use the slides. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. So,
okay, thank you very
Professor
much.
Faleiros, please.
My friends, I'll take the liberty to speak in English since we're here among academics that surely understand the language. So, Professor Nicolas, it's a huge pleasure to have you with us this afternoon.
Equal. I'm very honored to be here. Thank you very much.
The honor is ours. I'm surely that everyone here that's following us on YouTube, on the chat, the live chat, is excited to hear you. I had the opportunity to read beforehand your amazing contribution to the book. It's a great text that dialogues with a lot of my researches, including blockchain, public governance. So I'm really eager to hear you, my friend. It's going to be a pleasure. And I know of your tight schedule, so I won't take any longer.
No worries.
I have to thank Alexandre for the opportunity to be part of LAEC, and especially to be a part of this great project that starts with a new project taking place now in Spain as LAEC goes abroad. So the opportunity to participate in an event such as this, launching not only great lectures of all of authors, also the book itself is about to be published, is really a huge accomplishment. And Professor Nicolas, having you with us is the achievement we've all been looking forward this week. I'm looking forward to hearing you. So without further ado, I congratulate you on the great text. I salute you and welcome you to this conference. And feel free to start your lecture, my friend. It's great to have you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, I wanted to respond similarly. It's really an honor to be here and to take part in this adventure, and I look forward to hearing more about the projects that you have mentioned in Spain. That sounds really interesting, and the expansion of this project beyond is great. I'm going to share with you some slides that I'd prepared. Okay, I don't know if you can see them. And normally I should be able, yeah, perfect. Okay, so thank you very much for this opportunity. I think it was really, it was a very strange circumstance, because we began this project and I was offered by Renata to participate in this collective work, and I was really honored to be able to participate on such questions of global governance and cooperative constitutionalism, and this was obviously towards the beginning of the last academic year, and obviously everything changed, and I think a lot of things are going to change for us from a legal perspective too, since the event of COVID-19. But the reason of this phenomena it goes beyond, because the real change is that I think for a lot of people, it was a huge change also in what they were writing at the moment. And I remember that in the procedure of writing this chapter, I was profoundly shaken by the situation and could not see myself not adding a reflection as to what we were talking about in terms of what global governance needs to change and to exist in the current world, regarding the real dangers of our situation currently in terms of how global governance is accepted. And so originally, I think the idea, as I write it here on this slide, was to expose the emergence of new cooperative forms of governance through technology and their global impact in public and private law. But then COVID-19 happened, And I was faced both in my personal and professional life with teaching. As you can see, the room is empty, and we do a lot of hybrid teaching now. Most of it is on Zoom, is on virtual, and there was also a constitutional crisis. So our professional lives as legal scholars was really transformed, I think, by this event. And we were faced as well in Europe with a real constitutional crisis in terms of how to cooperate as nation states and how to consider or use the tools of global governance. And this became a question that I thought needed to be questioned in my chapter to this collective work. And that's why I asked myself, can we consider the emergence of these new cooperative forms of governance through technology in light of the situation of COVID-19, and asking ourselves what that means for the future of nation states and global governance in law. So from that problem, I realized that there was a real issue epistemologically when we discuss global governance and we confront it to the notion of cooperation. And the hypothesis I started my article with was that I believed that if we looked closer at the Enlightenment philosophy and the normative framework of nation states today, it is very hard to consider that cooperation in the sense of cooperating constitutional orders can actually be accepted by absolute sovereignty as it has been conceptualized in our modernity. And so I asked this question in my article to say, in the chapter of the collective work, to say, can absolute sovereignty of the state ever allow cooperative forms of constitutionalism that aren't within the nation state, that isn't a form of federalism, a form of acceptance that is only accepting the legal form that the nation state defends. And so the proposal, the epistemological proposal of the article was to say, I will not look at the nation state cooperation itself. I will try and look from the framework that has been developed by many legal scholars of transnational legal order and of societal constitutionalism. Now, those two notions are trying to understand how nation states and other organizations work together at a global or transnational level, and what that interaction, what that cooperation can mean when it is not the same normative order, when it is not necessarily a legal order from the nation state. In doing so, I decided to look at what was happening with the COVID-19 situation and the fragility of the cooperative mechanisms in EU community law regarding notably the reaction to this pandemic and to this crisis. The incapacity that we found in terms of strategy to react to the pandemic, in terms of coordination of financing and refinancing after the economic plight of the pandemic, and the constitutional conflicts that were occurring before the pandemic, but that were sort of strengthened by the pandemic. And I think here of obviously examples that have occurred recently, such as the German Constitutional Court refusing to give its competence to the European Central Bank in a ruling on the admittance of certain new bonds in terms of financing the the relance, as we would say in Europe. And so there are many examples of these constitutional conflicts that showed that at the European Union level, there is a real problem of cooperative mechanisms, and principally due to the principle of supremacy and the fact that the mechanisms built within our institutions are that of weak cooperation. And so that I develop in the article. And turning from this example, I ask myself, well, which actual epistemological position can we take to really find a new form of global governance with different normative orders and with different organizations that could be cooperative? And so that was the proposal that I did in the third part of my chapter, where I asked if we could reconsider globalization in regards to two major crises that global governance is going to have to face. And so to do that, I used the epistemological turn of the global turn that has been conceptualized by Professor Michael Xifaras from the SciencePo Law School, but also other professors, saying that using the global turn is using a new epistemological ground on which to consider the constitutional object in a world where normative phenomena are not immediately subjugated to the constitutional unity built by a state as a legal system. And so using this point of view, I wanted to see whether we could reconsider globalization from the viewpoint of the pandemic and from the viewpoint of the new climatic regime, which is being conceptualized legally as the new climatic regime, and which is based on the transformation of our biosphere and the new era geologically of the Anthropocene. I don't know if people are familiar with that concept, but it is a recurring concept in the debate of the modification of our global regime. And so the idea was to say, we need to understand that with the pandemic as a crisis, we are in a moment where most likely the world is going to deglobalize on many different aspects. And we know that there is a heightened moment of nationalism. And what we need to do is not fall into the barrier of nationalism, but without continuing the race to a globalized world that wouldn't allow for juridical touchdown, which means that wouldn't allow organizations that are international, that are global, to become responsible for their actions within the jurisdictions in which they act. So that is, those were two of the sort of major grounds on which I wanted to build this epistemology. And having said this epistemologically, saying that we need to reconsider our position as legal scholars, to go beyond the nation state, but to come back to the earth and not, to some extent, fall into the illusion of an eternal globalization in a crisis situation where deglobalization will most likely be a phenomena for the next perhaps 10 years, we need to consider what is going to happen. And one of the options that can help us to find new solutions that are not just falling back into nationalism is the possibility of thinking from a network perspective and of developing governance through information and dialogue of different normative regimes. But this can only be done if we have a tool for the cooperation within that network. And this demands that we harness existing legal techniques, such as those that I developed on private international law that has been the work of Professor Horatio Murwat, but also with technologies that can help create localized networks with a global process. For this, we need to be building the models and organizations that are founded on common utilities, which is at the heart of the capacity to build a cooperative network for global governance. And so that is one of the proposals I develop in my chapter on the possibility of having a planetary commons, notably for the virtual and the internet. And it asks, if we want to have a real cooperative global governance, it asks that we consider the possibility of post-market and post-state forms of governance. And this can be done through examples that are being developed in current technologies such as blockchain, but also in the communities of peer-to-peer and cooperative communities, such as the one that I mentioned. So here, which is the commons-based peer production communities, and the example in blockchain of Ethereum and Democracy Earth. So the second part of my chapter decided to explore these possibilities for cooperative global governance. And those were the two main case studies that I wanted to focus on. The existence of commons-based peer production communities that have the possibility of helping us to conceptualize an earthbound planetary commons, and the blockchain as a tool that can help us understand new forms of governance that spread through decentralized networks without being centered on the only legal form of the international legal system. So the transnational legal order, for instance, developed by the as a concept developed by the professors at Harvard, of which I quote in my chapter the review that I have done of their work on transnational legal order. And so in terms of blockchain as a tool that can perhaps give us new ideas of how to reinvent global governance that would be earthbound and that would not be escaping the realities of jurisdiction and of territory, I propose the example of Democracy Earth as a tool of governance and what they are developing and what that can help for us to rethink models of global governance. And I put here, as you can see on the slide, 4 of the main propositions that I developed in my chapter. So the idea of liberating identity and legal subjects, the idea of embedding private and public normative boundaries, the idea of exploring institutional interface with polycentric forms of governance, and the idea of implementing democratic governance beyond nation states for international organizations and other forms of organizations. So as a conclusion, this project is obviously a very small example of ideas that we can find through these technologies, but it doesn't mean that we must depend on technology as an ultimate solution. We must not fall in technological solutionism. And I think my chapter was trying to say that if we want to reinvent global governance and allow it to be really cooperative, we need to inspire ourselves of these new cooperative tools that are being developed by these global communities, but without thinking that that technology is the only solution. It must come with a political realization of what does it mean to de-globalize without falling into nationalism, without falling into the old system that is currently coming back to haunt us, and that is currently coming back to revoke what we used to know as neoliberal global governance, which is not necessarily a bad thing, to question neoliberal governance. The recommendations that I've put here as a conclusion are the recommendations that are built from what I'm working on with Professor Primavera de Filippi in terms of policymaking for global governance and the blockchain technology as an instrument for global governance. In the short term, I think one of the first solutions is to encourage public and private institutions to adopt blockchain technology in order to increase confidence and trust by means of technological guarantees. In the medium term, Primavera de Filippi proposes to encourage innovation in the blockchain space by promoting the use of blockchain technology for regulatory compliance. And in the long term, we can hope to foster the implementation and progressive adoption of shared blockchain infrastructures for public services that extend beyond national boundaries. So that is the conclusion about the possibilities of thinking global governance cooperatively by inspiring ourselves of these new tools that are emerging progressively in our world. So thank you very much. It was an honor to be able to present here amongst you. I look forward to your questions. I will have to leave at 7:45, unfortunately, but I will try and stay connected on the phone so I can continue to listen to the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Nicholas. It's very, very, very intriguing to imagine a world in which global governance might be dependent on structures such as blockchain. I might add that we're way past the debate of blockchain's origins and the controversies around Nakamoto and its inception as a structure for Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. I really like the way you report to Primavera de Filippi's articles on Ethereum. It's really, really a great network to explore. So I'd like to ask you, what are your insights regarding the state's, let me put it like this, reluctancy to adhere to blockchain as a regulatory space, at least in a sandbox environment for, let's say, testing purposes, without a huge global effort in that sense?
Well, I think the reticence is it's not shared by every state, but it's and that's actually the contradiction. I think a lot of states who are ostracized by the international community today are very interested in developing blockchain currencies or monitoring or experiencing the use of blockchain in public policy. The fact of the reticence in terms of regulation is because of that as well. It's because it can very easily escape the control of legal systems. And there is a real fear in terms of illegality and risks of forbidden trades on those aspects. But I have seen, however, in the studies that the OECD, for instance, produces, there has been a real progression of countries that are trying to implement public policy tests with blockchain. And you actually have examples in South America. And I believe, I mean, the report shows a few numbers of examples. I think Colombia was one of the first that wanted to try. I do not know to what extent they have followed through, but there was definitely an initiation in the desire of monitoring and seeing the utility of public use of blockchain.
Thank you, Professor. Indeed, here in Brazil, we've recently had a breakthrough in terms of blockchain adherence for notarial purposes, specifically in terms of preventing people from leaving their homes during quarantine and allowing notarial acts to be performed on a system that is actually called notary chain. It's very, very, yeah. But a recent breakthrough, the regulation for that came out on May 26th, if I'm not mistaken. So we have still a long way of research. But Professor, another question, I'd like to hear your take on the aftermath of the pandemic. So specifically in terms of how blockchain might be used as a platform for the creation of a global currency. Do you see that as a real possibility? Like, I'm not trying to be conspirational here, but in terms of the global impact, in terms of economic impacts, do you foresee a possibility that a global currency might be created and implemented in a structure such as Ethereum to overcome the obstacles of the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic?
That's actually very interesting, because right before the pandemic, if I'm not mistaken, the International Monetary Fund was already discussing the possibility of considering a virtual currency to double behind fiat currencies, so as to protect in case of a global crisis, in terms of a financial global crisis. The possibility that would really happen right now as a response to the pandemic, I do not know. I'm not sure I can give a real answer to that, because I think the problem is, and we've seen that in the past 2 years, there is a real geopolitical conflict in trying to regulate the cyberspace, and therefore in the capacity for the international community to actually come together, whether it be under the UN or whether it be under other, such as the Governance Tech Summit, the capacity of these countries to come together to regulate blockchain and Ethereum, that hasn't really happened, because there is a real crisis on cyberspace. There's incapacity to actually regulate, probably because of the fears of cyber warfare. And so it's too bad, because I think it's a very interesting idea. The IMF has been looking at it, the possibility of using a currency. I do not think it will happen if there's not a real effort of trying to legislate internationally on the use of blockchain before. So, yeah.
Professor, do we still fear the obscure origins of blockchain? Is that one of the reasons, perhaps, for this reluctancy of some states?
Probably, yes. I think there is definitely a fear as to the possibility of actually legalizing something that has an origin that is effectively, as you said it, very crypto-anarchist, people who have the dream of living beyond the state, without bureaucracy, without banks, and the fact that these are organizations that, yes, do not want to deal necessarily with the legal and the banking system. But the reality is that today, institutions, if we can call them institutions, such as Ethereum, are really becoming known, and very famous investors or institutions are investing in these projects. So the possibility that they become more accepted and more recognized as institutions, that is something that I think in the next 5 to 10 years it will make them more legitimate.
Amazing answer, Professor. It's great to hear you. One last question. In this proposal of an embedded state in which public and private spheres are intertwined, if I might say so, perhaps in the future, will we have governance in detriment of government?
Sorry, I didn't understand the end. Sorry.
In your opinion, this transition to a global system in which blockchain might be the infrastructure, the basis for the creation of legal standards in terms of compliance, governance per se. Do you feel that in the future, at some point, governance might surpass government in the strict sense?
Right. Well, it really depends what kind of political situation we're capable of building with blockchain, because there are two scenarios for me. There's a very dystopian scenario where governance by blockchain would take over politics, and that is a very something I'm strongly against, obviously, and it's the idea that effectively technological procedures would be considered as more valid than political processes of governance. And I think that is something that is very dystopian and that we must fight against. But it's true that a lot of the community of blockchain are people who believe that technology is a solution that can go beyond normal politics. But that is, there's a division within a blockchain community, because there are people that believe that, but there are also people that believe that blockchain technology is only a tool that we must put in the hands of people, that we must put in the hands of community so that they can become more democratic, more transparent, and more capable of dealing with finances in a decentralized and not corrupt manner. So it really depends of who you're talking to in the blockchain. But I would hope that we do not replace government by technological governance, because that would be Big Brother.
Yeah, and if I might add, we'd also fall into the risks of technocracy, right?
Absolutely.
Professor, that's all the questions that I had. I thank you so much for your time and for the clarification.
Thank you very much.
It's been a great opportunity for us all. And I invite my colleagues that are here with us to, if they wish, present more questions. We still have a few minutes, right?
Well, thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor Nicholas, for your presentation. It was wonderful to hear you. And I think that's a tricky issue. And hopefully, in the future, we can regulate internet, regulate cyberspace, and regulate blockchain as in a way that we can also protect human rights, protect fundamental rights, and everything else. So your work is very important for us. Is a very important step for this to be achieved. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you very much.
Professora Maria Carolina.
Posso falar em português? Eu só queria realmente agradecer a oportunidade de ouvi-lo. Eu agora estou curiosa para ler o seu texto e queria parabenizá-lo também, né, pela importância do trabalho. A importância mais da vontade. Desejar desculpa pela fala.
Okay. Professor Nicholas, I've already said it, but again, thank you for agreeing to participate with us. It's an honor for our lab, your participation, your lecture, and we hope that you can send us more materials, more texts, and all. Why don't we talk about something like a Portuguese edition of your be a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I look forward to listening to the other presentations and hopefully to engage further with your lab.
Okay. We know that you have some appointment, okay? But thank you.
Thank you.
And, meu caro José, você assume agora para o professor Vedovato?
De acordo. Once again,